Alright, we have sound. We good? The large cam going. Alright. Hopefully I'm coming through okay. So we got halfway through Monday. So we're on book 7. So let's jump right in this, huh? 1. Evil, the same old thing. No matter what happens, keep this in mind. It's the same old thing, from one end of the world to the other. It fills the history books, ancient and modern, and the cities, and the houses too. Nothing new at all, familiar, transient. 2. You cannot quench understanding unless you put out the insights that compose it. But you can rekindle those at will. Like glowing coals, I can control my thoughts as necessary. Then how can I be troubled? What is outside my mind means nothing to it. Absorb that lesson and your feet stand firm. You can return to life, look at things as you did before, and life returns. 3. Pointless bustling of processions, opera arias, herds of sheep and cattle, military exercises, a bone-flung pet poodles, a little food is in the fish tank. The miserable servitude of ants, scampering of frightened mice, puppets jerked on strings. Surrounded as we are by all of this, we need to practice acceptance, without disdain, but remembering that our own worth is measured by what we devote our energy to. 4. Focus on what is said when you speak and what results from each action. Know what the one aims at and what the other means. 5. Is my intellect up to this? If so, then I'll put it to work, like a tool provided by nature. And if it isn't, then I'll turn the job over to someone who can do better, unless I have no choice. Or I do the best I can with it, and collaborate with whoever can make use of it, to do what the community needs done. Because whatever I do, alone or with others, can aim at one thing only, what squares with those requirements. 6. So many who were remembered already forgotten, and those who remembered them long gone. 7. Don't be ashamed to need help. Like a soldier storming a wall, you have a mission to accomplish. And if you've been wounded and you need a comrade to pull you up, so what? 8. Forget the future. When and if it comes, you'll have the same resources to draw on, the same logos. 9. Everything is interwoven and the web is holy. None of its parts are unconnected. They are composed harmoniously, and together they compose the world. One world made up of all things, one divinity present in them all, one substance and one law, the logos that all rational beings share, and one truth. If this is indeed the culmination of one process, beings who share the same birth, the same logos. 10. All substance is soon absorbed into nature, all that animates it soon restored to the logos, all trace of them both soon covered over by time. 11. To a being with logos, an unnatural action is one that conflicts with the logos. 12. Straight, not straightened. 13. What is rational in different beings is related, like the individual limbs of a single being, and meant to function as a unit. This will be clearer to you if you remind yourself I am a single limb, melos, of a larger body, a rational one. Or you could say a part, meros, only a letter's difference, but then you're not really embracing other people. Helping them isn't yet its own reward. You're still seeing it only as the right thing to do. You don't yet realize who you're really helping. 14. Let it happen, if it wants, to whatever it can happen to, and what's affected can complain about it if it wants. It doesn't hurt me unless I interpret its happening as harmful to me. I can choose not to. 15. No matter what anyone says or does, my task is to be good, like gold or emerald or purple repeating to itself. No matter what anyone says or does, my task is to be emerald, my color undiminished. 16. The mind doesn't get in its own way. It doesn't frighten itself into desires. If other things can scare or hurt it, let them. It won't go down that road on the basis of its own perceptions. Let the body avoid discomfort, if it can, and if it feels it, say so. But the soul is what feels fear and pain, and what conceives of them in the first place, and it suffers nothing, because it will never conclude that it has. The mind in itself has no needs except for those it creates itself. Is undisturbed except for its own disturbances, knows no obstructions except those from within. 17. Well-being is good luck or good character. 17a. But what are you doing here, perceptions? Get back to where you came from, and good riddance. I don't need you. Yes, I know. It was only force of habit that brought you. No, I'm not angry with you. Just go away. 18. Frightened of change? But what can exist without it? What's closer to nature's heart? Can you take a hot bath and leave the firewood as it was? Eat food without transforming it? Can any vital process take place without something being changed? Can't you see? It's just the same with you, and just as vital to nature. 19. Carried through existence as though rushing rapids, all bodies, which are sprung from nature and cooperate with it, as our limbs do with each other. Time has swallowed a Chrysippus, a Socrates, and an Epictetus many times over. My only fear is doing something contrary to human nature, the wrong thing, the wrong way, or at the wrong time. Excuse me. 21. Close to forgetting it all, close to being forgotten. 22. To feel affection for people, even when they make mistakes, is uniquely human. Excuse me. You can do it if you simply recognize that they're human too, that they act out of ignorance against their will, and that you will both be dead before long. And above all, that they haven't really hurt you. They haven't diminished your ability to choose. 23. Nature takes substance and makes a horse, like a sculptor with wax, and then melts it down and uses the material for a tree, then for a person, then for something else, each existing only briefly. It does the container no harm to be put together, and none to be taken apart. 24. Anger in the face is unnatural, or in the end is put out for good, so that it can't be rekindled. Try to conclude its unnaturalness from that. If even the consciousness of acting badly has gone, why go on living? 25. Before long, nature, which controls it all, will alter everything. Everything you see and use it as material for something else, over and over again, so that the world is continually renewed. 26. When people injure you, ask yourself what good or harm they thought would come of it. If you understand that, you'll feel sympathy rather than outrage or anger. Your sense of good and evil may be the same as theirs or near it, in which case you have to excuse them. Or your sense of good and evil may differ from theirs, in which case they're misguided and deserve your compassion. Is that so hard? 27. Treat what you don't have as non-existent. Look at what you have, the things you value most, and think of how much you crave them if you didn't have them. But be careful. Don't feel such satisfaction that you start to overvalue them, that it would upset you to lose them. 44. Then the only proper response for me to make is this. You are much mistaken, my friend, if you think that any man worth his salt cares about the risk of death and doesn't concentrate on this alone, whether what he's doing is right or wrong, and his behavior a good man's or a bad one's. 45. It's like this, gentlemen of the jury. The spot where a person decides to station himself, or wherever his commanding officer stations him, well, I think that's where he ought to take his stand and face the enemy and not worry about being killed or about anything but doing his duty. 46. But my good friend, consider the possibility that nobility and virtue are not synonymous with the loss or preservation of one's life. Is it not possible that a real man should forget about living a certain number of years and should not cling to life, but leave it up to the gods, accepting, as women say, that no one can escape his fate, and turn his attention to how he can best live the life before him? 47. To watch the courses of the stars as if you revolved with them, to keep constantly in mind how the elements alter into one another. Thoughts like this wash off the mud of life below. 48. Plato has it right. If you want to talk about people, you need to look down on the earth from above. Herds, armies, farms, weddings, divorces, births, deaths, noisy courtrooms, desert places, all the foreign peoples, holidays, days of mourning, market days, all mixed together, a harmony of opposites. 49. Look at the past, empire succeeding empire, and from that extrapolate the future, the same thing. No escape from the rhythm of events. Which is why observing life for 40 years is as good as 1,000. Would you really see anything new? 50. Earth's offspring back to earth, but all that's born of heaven to heaven returns again. Either that or the cluster of atoms pulls apart, in one way or another the insensible elements disperse. 51. With food and drink and magic spells, seeking some novel way to frustrate death. 51a. To labor cheerfully and so endure the wind that blows from heaven. 52. A better wrestler, but not a better citizen, a better person, a better resource in tight places, a better forgiver of faults. 53. Wherever something can be done as the logos shared by gods and men dictates, all is in order. Where there is profit because our effort is productive, because it advances in step with our nature, there we have nothing to fear. 54. Everywhere, at each moment, you have the option to accept this event with humility, to treat this person as he should be treated, to approach this thought with care so that nothing irrational creeps in. 55. Don't pay attention to other people's minds. Look straight ahead where nature is leading you. Nature in general, through the things that happen to you, and your own nature, through your own actions. Everything has to do what it was made for, and other things were made for those with logos. In this respect, as in others, lower things exist for the sake of higher ones, and higher things for one another. Now, the main thing we were made for is to work with others. Secondly, to resist our body's urges, because things driven by logos, by thought, have the capacity for detachment, to resist impulses and sensations, both of which are merely corporeal. Thought seeks to be their master, not their subject, and so it should. They were created for its use. And the third thing is to avoid rashness and credulity. The mind that grasps this and steers straight ahead should be able to hold its own. 56. Think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly. 57. To love only what happens, what was destined, no greater harmony. 58. In all that happens, keep before your eyes those who experienced it before you and felt shock and outrage and resentment at it. And now, where are they? Nowhere. Is that what you want to be like? Instead of avoiding all these distracting assaults, leaving the alarms and flight to others, and concentrating on what you can do with it all? Because you can use it, treat it as raw material. Just pay attention and resolve to live up to your own expectations. In everything, and when faced with a choice, remember, our business is with things that really matter. 59. Dig deep. The water, goodness, is down there, and as long as you keep digging, it will keep bubbling up. 60. What the body needs is stability, to be impervious to jolts in all it is and does. The cohesiveness and beauty that intelligence lends to the face, that's what the body needs, but it should come without effort. 61. Not a dancer, but a wrestler, waiting poised and dug in for sudden assaults. 62. Look at who they really are, the people whose approval you long for, and what their minds are really like. Then you won't blame the ones who made mistakes they can't help, and you won't feel a need for their approval. You will have seen the sources of both, their judgments and their actions. 63. Against our will, our souls are cut off from truth. Truth, yes, and justice, self control, kindness. Important to keep this in mind. It will make you more patient with other people. 64. For times when you feel pain, see that it doesn't disgrace you or degrade your intelligence, doesn't keep it from acting rationally or unselfishly. And in most cases, what Epicurus said should help, that pain is neither unbearable nor unending, as long as you keep in mind its limits and don't magnify them in your imagination. And keep in mind, too, that pain often comes in disguise as drowsiness, fever, loss of appetite. When you're bothered by things like that, remind yourself, I'm giving in to pain. 65. Take care that you don't treat inhumanity as it treats human beings. 66. How do we know that Telegus wasn't a better man than Socrates? It's not enough to ask whether Socrates' death was nobler, whether he debated with sophists more adeptly, whether he showed greater endurance by spending the night out in the cold, and when he ordered to arrest the man from Salamis, decided it was preferable to refuse, and swaggered about the streets, which one could reasonably doubt. What matters is what kind of soul he had, whether he was satisfied to treat men with justice and the gods with reverence, and didn't lose his temper unpredictably at evil done by others, didn't make himself the slave of other people's ignorance, didn't treat anything that nature did as abnormal, or put up with it as an unbearable imposition, didn't put his mind in his body's keeping. 67. Nature did not blend things so inextricably that you can't draw your own boundaries, place your own well-being in your own hands. It's quite possible to be a good man without anyone realizing it. Remember that. And this too, you don't need much to live happily, and just because you've abandoned your hopes of becoming a great thinker or scientist, don't give up on attaining freedom, achieving humility, serving others, obeying God. 68. To live life in peace, immune to all compulsion, let them scream whatever they want. Let animals dismember this soft flesh that covers you. How would any of that stop you from keeping your mind calm, reliably sizing up what's around you, and ready to make good use of whatever happens? So that judgment can look the event in the eye and say, this is what you really are, regardless of what you may look like. While adaptability adds, you're just what I was looking for, because to me, the present is a chance for the exercise of rational virtue, civic virtue, in short, the art that men share with gods. Both treat whatever happens as wholly natural, not novel or hard to deal with, but familiar and easily handled. 69. Perfection of character, to live your last day, every day, without frenzy or sloth or pretense. 70. The gods live forever, and yet they don't seem annoyed at having to put up with human beings and their behavior throughout eternity, and not only put up with, but actively care for them. And you, on the verge of death, you still refuse to care for them, although you're one of them yourself. 71. It's silly to try to escape other people's faults. They are inescapable. Just try to escape your own. 72. Whenever the force that makes us rational and social encounters something that is neither, then it can reasonably regard it as inferior. 73. You've given aid and they've received it, and yet, like an idiot, you keep holding out for more, to be credited with a good deed, to be repaid in kind. Why? 74. No one objects to what is useful to him. To be used to others is natural. Then don't object to what is useful to you, being of use. 75. Nature willed the creation of the world. Either all that exists follows logically, or even those things to which the world's intelligence most directs its will are completely random. A source of serenity in more situations than one. That was book 7. Just making sure of something. On to book 8. One. Another encouragement to humility. You can't claim to have lived your life as a philosopher, not even your whole adulthood. You can see for yourself how far you are from philosophy, and so can many others. You're tainted. It's not so easy now to have a reputation as a philosopher, and your position is an obstacle as well. So you know how things stand. Now forget what they think of you. Be satisfied if you can live the rest of your life, however short as your nature demands. Focus on that, and don't let anything distract you. You've wandered all over and finally realized that you never found what you were after, how to live. Not in syllogisms, not in money, or fame, or self-indulgence, nowhere. Then where is it to be found? In doing what human nature requires. How? Through first principles, which should govern your intentions and your actions. What principles? Those to do with good and evil, that nothing is good except what leads to fairness, and self-control, and courage, and free will, and nothing bad except what does the opposite. Excuse me. 2. For every action, ask, how does it affect me? Could I change my mind about it? But soon I'll be dead, and the slate's empty. So this is the only question. Is it the action of a responsible being, part of society, and subject to the same decrees as God? 3. Alexander and Caesar and Pompey, compared with Diogenes, Heraclitus, Socrates, the philosophers knew the what, the why, the how. Their minds were their own. The others, nothing but anxiety and enslavement. 4. You can hold your breath until you turn blue, but they'll still go on doing it. 5. The first step, don't be anxious. Nature controls it all, and before long, you'll be no one, nowhere, like Hadrian, like Augustus. The second step, concentrate on what you have to do. Fix your eyes on it. Remind yourself that your task is to be a good human being. Remind yourself what nature demands of people, then do it, without hesitation, and speak the truth as you see it, but with kindness, with humility, without hypocrisy. 6. Nature's job, to shift things elsewhere, to transform them, to pick them up and move them here and there, constant alteration. But not to worry, there's nothing new here, everything is familiar, even the proportions are unchanged. 7. Nature of any kind thrives on forward progress, and progress for a rational mind means not accepting falsehood or uncertainty in its perceptions, making unselfish actions its only aim, seeking and shunning only the things it has control over, embracing what nature demands of it, the nature in which it participates, as the leaf's nature does in the trees, except that the nature shared by the leaf is without consciousness or reason, and subject to impediments, whereas that shared by human beings is without impediments, and rational and just, since it allots to each and everything an equal and proportionate share of time, being purpose, action, chance. Examine it closely, not whether they're identical point by point, but in the aggregate, this weighed against that. 8. No time for reading, for controlling your arrogance, yes. For overcoming pain and pleasure, yes. For outgrowing ambition, yes. For not feeling anger at stupid and unpleasant people, even for caring about them, for that, yes. 9. Don't be overheard complaining about life at court, not even to yourself. 10. Remorse is annoyance at yourself for having passed up something that's to your benefit. But if it's to your benefit, it must be good, something a truly good person would be concerned about. But no truly good person would feel remorse at passing up pleasure. So it cannot be to your benefit or good. 11. What is this fundamentally? What is its nature and substance, its reason for being? What is it doing in the world? How long is it here for? 12. When you have trouble getting out of bed in the morning, remember that your defining characteristic, what defines a human being, is to work with others. Even animals know how to sleep. And it's the characteristic activity that's the more natural one, more innate and more satisfying. 13. Apply them constantly to everything that happens. Physics, ethics, logic. Nope, I don't have one. How's it going, Sarah? Not yet, anyway. 14. When you have to deal with someone, ask yourself, what does he mean by good and bad? If he thinks X or Y about pleasure and pain, and what produces them, about fame and disgrace, about death and life, then it shouldn't shock or surprise you when he does X or Y. In fact, I will remind myself that he has no real choice. 15. Remember, you shouldn't be surprised that a fig tree produces figs, nor the world what it produces. A good doctor isn't surprised when his patients have fevers, or a helmsman when the wind blows against him. 16. Remember that to change your mind and to accept correction are free acts too. The action is yours based on your own will, your own decision, and your own mind. 17. If it's in your control, why do you do it? If it's in someone else's, then who are you blaming? Atoms? The gods? Stupid either way. Blame no one. Set people straight if you can. If not, just repair the damage, and suppose you can't do that either. Then where does blaming people get you? No pointless actions. 18. What dies doesn't vanish. It stays here in the world, transformed, dissolved as parts of the world and of you, which are transformed in turn, without grumbling. 19. Everything is here for a purpose, from horses to vine shoots. What's surprising about that? Even the sun will tell you, I have a purpose, and the other gods as well. And why were you born? For pleasure? See if that answer will stand up to questioning. 20. Nature is like someone throwing a ball in the air, gauging its rise and arc, and where it will fall. And what does the ball gain as it flies upward, or lose when it plummets to earth? What does the bubble gain from its existence, or lose by bursting? And the same for a candle. 21. Turn it inside out. What is it like? What is it like old, or sick, or selling itself on the streets? They all die soon. Praiser and praised, remember and remembered. Remembered in these parts or in the corner of them. Even there they don't all agree with each other, or even with themselves. And the whole earth, a mere point in space. 22. Stick to what's in front of you. Idea, action, utterance. 22a. This is what you deserve. You could be good today, but instead you choose tomorrow. 23. What I do? I attribute it to human beneficence. What is done to me? I accept it and attribute it to the gods, and that source from which all things together flow. 24. Like the baths, oil, sweat, dirt, grayish water, all of it disgusting. The whole of life, all of the visible world. 25. Verus, leaving Lucilla behind, then Lucilla. Maximus, leaving Secunda, and Secunda, Diotimus, leaving Epictetus, then Epictetus, Faustina, leaving Antoninus, then Antoninus. So with all of them. Hadrian leaving Celer, and Celer. Where have they gone? The brilliant, the insightful ones, the proud, brilliant as Schirra, and Demetrius, the Platonist, and Eudaemon, and the rest of them? Short-lived creatures, long dead, some of them not remembered at all, some become legends, some lost even to legend. Aw, thanks for the subscription, Sarah. So remember your components will be scattered too. The life within you, quenched. Or marching orders and another posting. 26. Joy for humans lies in human actions. Human actions, kindness to others, contempt for the senses, the interrogation of appearances, observation of nature and of events in nature. 27. 3 relationships. 1 with the body you inhabit, 2 with the divine, the cause of everything and all things, and 3 with the people around you. 28. Either pain affects the body, which is the body's problem, or it affects the soul, but the soul can choose not to be affected, preserving its own serenity, its own tranquility. All our decisions, urges, desires, aversions lie within. No evil can touch them. But wait until I start reading actual history books instead of philosophy. 29. To erase false perceptions, tell yourself, I have it in me to keep my soul from evil, lust and all confusion, to see things as they are and treat them as they deserve. Don't overlook this innate ability. 30. To speak to the Senate or anyone in the right tone, without being overbearing, to choose the right words. 31. Augustus's court, his wife, his daughter, his grandsons, his stepsons, his sister, Agrippa, the relatives, servants, friends, Arius, Maecenas, the doctors, the sacrificial priests, the whole court dead, and consider the others, not just the deaths of individuals, like the family of the Pompeys. That line they write on tombs, last surviving descendant. Consider their ancestors' anxiety that there be a successor, but someone has to be the last. There too, the death of a whole house. 32. You have to assemble your life yourself, action by action, and be satisfied if each one achieves its goal as far as it can. No one can keep that from happening, but there are external obstacles, not to behaving with justice, self-control, and good sense. Well, but perhaps to some more concrete action. But if you accept the obstacle and work with what you're given, an alternative will present itself. Another piece of what you're trying to assemble, action by action. 33. To accept it without arrogance, to let it go with indifference. 34. Have you ever seen a severed hand or foot or a decapitated head just lying somewhere far away from the body it belonged to? That's what we do to ourselves, or try to, when we rebel against what happens to us, when we segregate ourselves, or when we do something selfish. You have torn yourself away from unity, your natural state, one you were born to share in. Now you've cut yourself off from it. But you have one advantage here. You can reattach yourself, a privilege God has granted to no other part of no other whole, to be separated, cut away, and reunited. But look how he's singling us out. He's allowed us not to be broken off in the first place, and when we are, he's allowed us to return, to graft ourselves back on and take up our old position once again, part of a whole. 35. We have various abilities, present in all rational creatures as in the nature of rationality itself, and this is one of them. Just as nature takes every obstacle, every impediment, and works around it, turns it to its purposes, incorporates it into itself, so too a rational being can turn each setback into raw material and use it to achieve its goal. 36. Don't let your imagination be crushed by life as a whole. Don't try to picture everything bad that could possibly happen. Stick with the situation at hand and ask, why is this so unbearable? Why can't I endure it? You'll be embarrassed to answer. Then remind yourself that past and future have no power over you, only the present, and even that can be minimized. Just mark off its limits. And if your mind tries to claim that it can't hold out against that, well then, heap shame upon it. 17. Are Panthea or Pergamos still keeping watch at the tomb of the Verus? Chabrias or Diotimus at the tomb of Hadrian? Of course they aren't. Would the emperors know it if they were? And even if they knew, would it please them? And even if it did, would the mourners live forever? Were they too not fated to grow old and then die? And when that happened, what would the emperors do? 38. The stench of decay, rotting meat in a bag. Look at it clearly, if you can. 39. To the best of my judgment, when I look at the human character, I see no virtue placed there to counter justice, but I see one to counter pleasure, self-control. 40. Stop perceiving the pain you imagine, and you'll remain completely unaffected. You're logos, but I'm not just logos. Fine, just don't let the logos be injured. If anything else is, let it decide that fate for itself. 41. For animate beings, harmful is whatever obstructs the operation of their senses, or the fulfillment of what they intend. Similar obstructions constitute harm to plants. So too for rational creatures. Anything that obstructs the operation of the mind is harmful. Apply this to yourself. Do pain and pleasure have their hooks in you? Let the senses deal with it. Are there obstacles to your action? If you fail to reckon with the possibility, then that would harm you as a rational being. But if you use common sense, you haven't been harmed or even obstructed. No one can obstruct the operations of the mind. Nothing can get at them. Not fire or steel, not tyrants, not abuse, nothing, as long as it's a sphere in perfect stillness. 42. I have no right to do myself an injury. Have I ever injured anyone else if I could avoid it? People find pleasure in different ways. I find it in keeping my mind clear, in not turning away from people or things that happen to them, in accepting and welcoming everything I see and treating each thing as it deserves. 44. Give yourself a gift, the present moment. People out for posthumous fame forget that the generations to come will be the same annoying people they know now, and just as mortal. What does it matter to you if they say X about you or think Y? 45. Lift me up and hurl me, wherever you will. My spirit will be gracious to me there, gracious and satisfied, as long as its existence and actions match its nature. Is there any reason why my soul should suffer and be degraded, miserable, tense, huddled, frightened? How could there be? 46. What humans experience is part of human experience. The experience of the ox is part of the experience of oxen. As the vines is of the vine, and the stones what is proper to stones. Nothing that can happen is unusual or unnatural, and there's no sense in complaining. Nature does not make us endure the unendurable. 47. External things are not the problem, it's your assessment of them, which you can erase right now. If the problem is something in your own character, who's stopping you from setting your mind straight? And if it's that you're not doing something you think you should be, why not just do it? But there are insuperable obstacles. Then it's not a problem. The cause of your inaction lies outside you. But how can I go on living with that undone? Then depart with a good conscience, as if you've done it, embracing the obstacles too. 48. Remember that when it withdraws into itself and finds contentment there, the mind is invulnerable. It does nothing against its will, even if its resistance is irrational and if its judgment is deliberate and grounded in logic. The mind without passions is a fortress. No place is more secure. Once we take refuge there, we are safe forever. Not to see this is ignorance. To see it and not seek safety means misery. 49. Nothing but what you get from first impressions. That someone has insulted you, for instance. That, but not that it's done you any harm. The fact that my son is sick, that I can see, but that he might die of it, no. Stick with first impressions. Don't extrapolate, and nothing can happen to you. Or extrapolate from a knowledge of all that can happen in the world. 50. The cucumber is bitter, then throw it out. There are brambles in the path, then go around them. That's all you need to know, nothing more. Don't demand to know why such things exist. Anyone who understands the world will laugh at you, just as a carpenter would if you seemed shocked at finding sawdust in his workshop, or a shoemaker at scraps of leather left over from work. Of course, they have a place to dispose of these. Nature has no door to sweep things out of. But the wonderful thing about its workmanship is how, faced with that limitation, it takes everything within it that seems broken, old, and useless, transforms it into itself, and makes new things from it, so that it doesn't need material from any outside source, or anywhere to dispose of what's left over. It relies on itself for all its needs, space, material, and labor. 51. No carelessness in your actions, no confusion in your words, no imprecision in your thoughts, no retreating into your own soul or trying to escape it, no overactivity. They kill you, cut you with knives, shower you with curses, and that somehow cuts your mind off from clearness and sanity and self-control and justice. A man standing by a spring of clear, sweet water and cursing it, while the fresh water keeps on bubbling up. He can shovel mud into it or dung, and the stream will carry it away, wash itself clean, remain unstained. To have that, not a cistern, but a perpetual spring. How? By working to win your freedom, hour by hour, through patience, honesty, humility. 52. Not to know what the world is to be ignorant of where you are. Not to know why it's here is to be ignorant of who you are and what it is. Not to know any of this is to be ignorant of why you're here. And what are we to make of anyone who cares about the applause of such people who don't know where or who they are? 53. You want praise from people who kick themselves every 15 minutes? The approval of people who despise themselves? Is it a sign of self-respect to regret nearly everything you do? 54. To join ourselves not just to the air surrounding us through breath, but to the reason that embraces all things through thought. Reason is just an omnipresent, just a widely diffused in those who accept it as air is in those who breathe. 55. The existence of evil does not harm the world. An individual act of evil does not harm the victim. Only the one person is harmed by it, and he can stop being harmed as soon as he decides to. 56. Other people's wills are as independent of mine as their breath and bodies. We may exist for the sake of one another, but our will rules its own domain. Otherwise, the harm they do would cause harm to me, which is not what God intended, for my happiness to rest with someone else. 57. We speak of the sun's light as pouring down on us, as pouring over us in all directions, yet it's never poured out, because it doesn't really pour. It extends, it beams, acti, get their name from their extension, ectinestai. To see the nature of a sunbeam, look at light as it falls through a narrow opening into a dark room. It extends in a straight line, striking any solid object that stands in its way and blocks the space beyond it. There it remains, not vanishing or falling away. That's what the outpouring, the diffusion of thought should be like, not emptied out but extended, and not striking at obstacles with fury and violence, or falling away before them, but holding its ground and illuminating what receives it. What doesn't transmit light creates its own darkness. 58. Fear of death is fear of what we may experience, nothing at all or something quite new. But if we experience nothing, we can experience nothing bad, and if our experience changes, then our existence will change with it. Change but not cease. 59. People exist for one another. You can instruct or endure them. 60. An arrow has one motion, and the mind another. Even when pausing, even when weighing conclusions, the mind is moving forward towards its goal. 61. To enter others' minds and let them enter yours. Into book 8. And there's a few people who read on Twitch. So on to book 9. What page are we on? We're getting there. So like 40 more pages, yay. 1. Injustice is a kind of blasphemy. Nature designed rational beings for each other's sake, to help, not harm one another as they deserve. To transgress its will, then, is to blaspheme against the oldest of the gods. And to lie is to blaspheme against it too, because nature means the nature of that which is. And that which is and that which is the case are closely linked, so that nature is synonymous with truth, the source of all true things. To lie deliberately is to blaspheme. The liar commits deceit, and thus injustice, and likewise to lie without realizing it, because the involuntary liar disrupts the harmony of nature, its order. He is in conflict with the way the world is structured, as anyone is who deviates towards what is opposed to the truth, even against his will. Nature gave him the resources to distinguish between true and false, and he neglected them, and now can't tell the difference. And to pursue pleasure is good, and flee from pain is evil, that too is blasphemous. Someone who does that is bound to find himself constantly reproaching nature, complaining that it doesn't treat the good and bad as they deserve, but often lets the bad enjoy pleasure in the things that produce it, and makes the good suffer pain in the things that produce pain. And moreover, to fear pain is to fear something that's bound to happen. the world being what it is, and that again is blasphemy. While if you pursue pleasure, you can hardly avoid wrongdoing, which is manifestly blasphemous. Some things nature is indifferent to. If it privileged one over the other, it would hardly have created both. And if we want to follow nature to be of one mind with it, we need to share its indifference. To privilege pleasure over pain, life over death, fame over anonymity, is clearly blasphemous. Nature certainly doesn't. And when I say the nature is indifferent to them, I mean that they happen indifferently at different times to the things that exist. And the things that come into being after them, through some ancient decree of providence, the decree by which from some initial starting point it embarked on the creation that we know, by laying down the principles of what was to come and determining the generative forces, existence and change in their successive stages. 2. Real good luck would be to abandon life without ever encountering dishonesty, or hypocrisy, or self-indulgence, or pride. But the next best voyage is to die when you've had enough. Or are you determined to lie down with evil? Hasn't experience even taught you that to avoid it like the plague? Because it is a plague, a mental cancer, worse than anything caused by tainted air or unhealthy climate. Diseases like that can only threaten your life. This one attacks your humanity. 3. Don't look down on death, but welcome it. It too is one of the things required by nature. Like youth and old age, like growth and maturity, like a new set of teeth, a beard, the first gray hair, like sex and pregnancy and childbirth. Like all the other physical changes at each stage of life, our dissolution is no different. So this is how a thoughtful person should await death. Not with indifference, not with impatience, not with disdain, but simply viewing it as one of the things that happen to us. Now you anticipate the child's emergence from its mother's womb. That's how you should await the hour when your soul will emerge from its compartment. Or perhaps you need some tidy aphorism to tuck away in the back of your mind. Well, consider two things that should reconcile you to death. The nature of the things you'll leave behind you, and the kind of people you'll no longer be mixed up with. There's no need to feel resentment toward them. In fact, you should look out for their well-being and be gentle with them. But keep in mind that everything you believe is meaningless to those you leave behind, because that's all that could restrain us, if anything could. The only thing that could make us want to stay here, the chance to live with those who share our vision. But now, look how tiring it is, this cacophony we live in. Enough to make you say to death, come quickly, before I start to forget myself, like them. 4. To do harm is to do yourself harm. To do an injustice is to do yourself an injustice. It degrades you. 5. And you can also commit injustice by doing nothing. 6. Objective judgment now, at this very moment. Unselfish action now, at this very moment. Willing acceptance now, at this very moment, of all external events. That's all you need. 7. Blot out your imagination, turn your desire to stone, quench your appetites, keep your mind centered on itself. 8. Animals without the logos are assigned the same soul, and those who have the logos share one too, a rational one, just as all earthly creatures share one earth, just as we all see by the same light and breathe the same air, all of us who see and breathe. 9. All things are drawn towards what is like them. If such a thing exists, all earthly things feel the earth's tug, all wet things flow together, and airy things as well, so they have to be forcibly prevented from mixing. Fire is naturally drawn upward by that higher fire, but ready to ignite at the slightest touch of other earthly flame, so that anything drier than the usual makes good fuel, because less of what hinders combustion is mixed in with it. And things that share an intelligent nature are just as prone to seek out what is like them, if not more so, because their superiority in other ways is matched by their greater readiness to mix and mingle with their counterparts. Even in irrational beings, we see swarms and herds and nesting in love not unlike ours, because they do have souls, and the bonding instinct is found in a developed form, not something we see in plants or stones or trees. If it's still more developed in rational beings, with their states, friendships, families, groups, their treaties and truces, and in those yet more developed there is a kind of unity, even between separate things, the kind that we see in the stars. An advanced level of development can produce a sympathy even in things that are quite distinct. But look how things are now. The rational things are the only ones that have lost that sense of attraction, of convergence. Only there do we not see that intermingling. But however much they try to avoid it, there's no escaping. Nature is stronger, as you can see if you look closely. Concrete objects can pull free of the earth more easily than humans can escape humanity. 10. Humanity, divinity, and the world, all of them bearing fruit, each fruitful in its season. Normally we limit the world to vines and other plants, unnecessarily. The fruit of the Logos nourishes both us and it, and other things spring from it too, of the same species as the Logos itself. 11. Convince them not to, if you can, and if not, remember, the capacity for patience was given us for a reason. The gods are patient with them too, and even help them to concrete things, health, money, fame, such is the God's goodness, and yours too, if you wanted. What's stopping you? 12. Work. Not to rouse pity, not to win sympathy or admiration, only this: activity, stillness, as the Logos of state requires. 13. Today I escaped from anxiety, or no, I discarded it because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside. 14. Known by long experience, limited in lifespan, debased in substance, all of it, now as then, in the time of those we buried. 15. Things wait outside us, hover at the door. They keep to themselves. Ask them who they are, and they don't know. They can give no account of themselves. What accounts for them? The mind does. 16. Not being done to, but doing. The source of good and bad for rational and political beings, where their own goodness and badness is found not in being done to, but in doing. 17. A rock thrown in the air. It loses nothing by coming down, gain nothing by going up. 18. Enter their minds and you'll find the judges you're so afraid of, and how judiciously they judge themselves. 19. Everything in flux, and you too will alter in the world and perish, and the world as well. 20. Leave other people's mistakes where they lie. 21. When we cease from activity or follow a thought to its conclusion, it's a kind of death, and it does harm us. Think about your life. Childhood, boyhood, youth, old age, every transformation a kind of dying. Was that so terrible? Think about life with your grandfather, your mother, your adopted father. Realize how many other deaths and transformations and endings there have been, and ask yourself, was that so terrible? Then neither will the close of your life be, its ending and transformation. 22. Go straight to the seat of intelligence, your own, the world's, your neighbor's, your own to ground in injustice, the world's to remind yourself what it is that you're part of, your neighbor's to distinguish ignorance from calculation and recognize it as like yours. 23. You participate in a society by your existence, then participate in its life through your actions, all your actions. Any action not directed toward a social end, directly or indirectly, is a disturbance to your life, an obstacle to wholeness, a source of dissension, like the man in the assembly, a faction to himself, always out of step with the majority. 24. Childish tantrums, children's games, spirits carrying corpses. Odysseus in the underworld saw more real life. 25. Identify its purpose, what makes it what it is, and examine that. Ignore its concrete form. Then calculate the length of time that such a thing was meant to last. 26. Endless suffering, all from not allowing the mind to do its job. Enough. 27. When you face someone's insults, hatred, whatever, look at his soul. Get inside him. Look at what sort of person he is. You'll find you don't need to strain to impress him. But you do have to wish him well. He's your closest relative. The gods assist him just as they do you, by signs and dreams and every other way, to get the things he wants. 28. The world's cycles never change, up and down from age to age. Either the world's intelligence wills each thing. If so, accept its will, or its exercise that will once and for all, and all else follows as consequence, and if so, why worry? One way or another, atoms are unity. If it's God, all is well. If it's arbitrary, don't imitate it. The earth will cover us all and then be transformed in turn, and that too will change ad infinitum. And that as well ad infinitum. Think about them, the waves of change and alteration, endlessly breaking, and see our brief mortality for what it is. 29. The design of the world is like a flood, sweeping all before it. The foolishness of them, little men busy with affairs of state, with philosophy, or what they think of as philosophy, nothing but phlegm and mucus. Well then what? Do what nature demands. Get a move on, if you have it in you. And don't worry whether anyone will give you credit for it. And don't go expecting Plato's Republic. Be satisfied with even the smallest progress and treat the outcome of it all as unimportant. Who can change their minds? And without that change, what is there but groaning, slavery, a pretense of obedience? Go on and cite Alexander, Philip, Demetrius, Phalerum. Whether they knew nature's will and made themselves its student is for them to say. And if they preferred to play the king, well, no one forced me to be their understudy. The task of philosophy is modest and straightforward. Don't tempt me to presumption. 30. To see them from above, the thousands of animal herds, the rituals, the voyages on calm or stormy seas, the different ways we come into the world, share it with one another and leave it. Consider the lives led once by others, long ago, the lives to be led by others after you, the lives led even now, in foreign lands. How many people don't even know your name? How many will soon have forgotten it? How many offer your praise now and tomorrow perhaps contempt? That to be remembered is worthless, like fame, like everything. 31. Indifference to external events and a commitment to justice in your own acts, which means thought and action resulting in the common good, what you were born to do. 32. You can discard most of the junk that clutters your mind, things that exist only there, and clear out space for yourself, by comprehending the scale of the world, by contemplating infinite time, by thinking of the speed with which things change, each part of everything, the narrow space between our birth and death, the infinite time before, the equally unbounded time that follows. 33. All that you see will soon have vanished, and those who see it vanish will vanish themselves, and the ones that who reached old age have no advantage over the untimely dead. 34. What their minds are like, what they work at, what evokes their love and admiration. Imagine their souls stripped bare in their vanity, to suppose that their disdain could harm anyone or their praise help them. 35. To decompose is to be recomposed. That's what nature does. Nature, through whom all things happen as they should, and have happened forever in just the same way, and will continue to, one way or another, endlessly. That things happen for the worst, and always will, that the gods have no power to regulate them, and the world is condemned to never-ending evil. How can you say that? 36. Disgust at what things are made of, liquid, dust, bones, filth, or marble as hardened dirt, gold and silver as residues, clothes as hair, purple dye as shellfish blood, and all the rest, and the same with our living, breathing, transformed from one thing to another. 37. Enough of this wretched, whining, monkey life. What's the matter? Is any of this new? What is it you find surprising? The purpose? Look at it. The material? Look at that. That's all there is. And the gods? Well, you could try being simpler, gentler, even now. 100 years or 3, no difference. 38. If they've injured you, then they're the ones who suffer for it. But have they? 39. Either all things spring from one intelligent source and form a single body, and the part should accept the actions of the whole, or there are only atoms joining and splitting forever and nothing else. So why feel anxiety? Say to your mind, are you dead, damaged, brutal, dishonest? Are you one of the herd or grazing like one? 40. Either the gods have power or they don't. If they don't, why pray? If they do, then why not pray for something else instead of for things to happen or not to happen? Pray not to feel fear, or desire, or grief. If the gods can do anything, they can surely do that for us. But those are things the gods left up to me. Then isn't it better to do what's up to you, like a free man, than to be passively controlled by what isn't, like a slave or a beggar? And what makes you think the gods don't care about what's up to us? Start praying like this and you'll see. Not some way to sleep with her, but a way to stop wanting to. Not some way to get rid of them, but a way to stop trying. Not some way to save my child, but a way to lose your fear. Redirect your prayers like that, and watch what happens. 41. Epicurus. During my illness, my conversations were not about my physical state. I did not waste my visitors' time with things of that sort, but went on discussing philosophy and concentrated on one point in particular, how the mind can participate in the sensations of the body and yet maintain its serenity and focus on its own well-being, nor did I let my doctors strut about like grandees. I went on living my life the way it should be lived, like that, in illness or any other situation. Not to let go of philosophy, no matter what happens, not to bandy words with crackpots and Philistines, good rules for any philosopher. Concentrate on what you're doing and what you're doing it with. 42. When you run up against someone else's shamelessness, ask yourself this. Is a world without shamelessness possible? No. Then don't ask the impossible. There have to be shameless people in the world. This is one of them. The same for someone vicious or untrustworthy, or with any other defect. Remembering that the whole class has to exist will make you more tolerant of its members. Another useful point to bear in mind, what qualities has nature given us to counter that defect? As an antidote to unkindness, it gave us kindness, and other qualities to balance other flaws. And when others stray off course, you can always try to set them straight, because every wrongdoer is doing something wrong, doing something the wrong way. And how does it injure you anyway? You'll find that none of the people you're upset about has done anything that could do damage to your mind, but that's all that harm or injury could mean. Yes, boorish people do boorish things. What's strange or unheard of about that? Isn't it yourself you should reproach for not anticipating that they'd act this way? The Logos gave you the means to see it, that a given person would act a given way, but you paid no attention. And now you're astonished that he's gone and done it. So when you call someone untrustworthy or ungrateful, turn the reproach on yourself. It was you who did wrong by assuming that someone with those traits deserved your trust, or by doing them a favor and expecting something in return instead of looking to the action itself for your reward. What else did you expect from helping someone out? Isn't it enough that you've done what your nature demands? You want a salary for it too? As if your eyes expected a reward for seeing, or your feet for walking. That's what they were made for. By doing what they were designed to do, they're performing their functions, whereas humans were made to help others. And when we do help others, or help them to do something, we're doing what we were designed for. We perform our function. In book 9. We'll take a short break. Empty the bladder, the old man bladder, and get more water. Because reading's thirsty business. Alright, be right back. to the large cam. Yay. I didn't even check if chat box was working. Oh well. Alright. Working? Okay. Just gotta make sure the sound's on because that's the main part of this. If I keep myself muted, this will go bad. Alright. Book 10. 1. To my soul. Are you ever going to achieve goodness? Ever going to be simple, whole, and naked, as plain to see as the body that contains you? Know what an affectionate and loving disposition would feel like? Ever be fulfilled, ever stop desiring, lusting and longing for people and things to enjoy? Or for more time to enjoy them? Or for some other place or country, a more temperate clime? Or for people easier to get along with? And instead be satisfied with what you have and accept the present, all of it, and convince yourself that everything is the gift of the gods, and that things are good and always will be, whatever they decide and have in store for the preservation of that perfect entity, good and just and beautiful, creating all things, connecting and embracing them, and gathering in their separated fragments to create more like them. Will you ever take your stand as a fellow citizen with gods and human beings, blaming no one, deserving no one's censure? 2. Focus on what nature demands, as if you were governed by that alone. Then do that and accept it, unless your nature as a living being would be degraded by it. Then focus on what that nature demands and accept that too, unless your nature as a rational being would be degraded by it. And of course, rational also implies civic. Follow these guidelines and don't waste time on anything else. 3. Everything that happens is either endurable or not. If it's endurable, then endure it. Stop complaining. If it's unendurable, then stop complaining. Your destruction will mean its end as well. Just remember, you can endure anything your mind can make endurable by treating it as in your own interest to do so, in your interest or in your nature. 4. If they've made a mistake, correct them gently and show them where they went wrong. If you can't do that, then the blame lies with you, or no one. 5. Whatever happens to you has been waiting to happen since the beginning of time. The twining strands of fate wove both of them together, your own existence and the things that happen to you. 6. Whether it's atoms or nature, the first thing to be said is this: I am a part of a world controlled by nature. Secondly, that I have a relationship with other similar parts, and that with that in mind, I have no right as a part to complain about what is assigned me by the whole. Because what benefits the whole can't harm the parts, and the whole does nothing that doesn't benefit it. That's a trait shared by all natures, but the nature of the world is defined by a second characteristic as well. No outside force can compel it to cause itself harm. So by keeping in mind the whole I form a part of, I'll accept whatever happens, and because of my relationship to other parts, I will do nothing selfish, but aim instead to join them, to direct my every action toward what benefits us all and to avoid what doesn't. If I do all that, then my life should go smoothly, as you might expect a citizen's life to go, one whose actions serve his fellow citizens and who embraces the community's decree. 7. The whole is compounded by nature of individual parts, whose destruction is inevitable. Destruction here meaning transformation. If the process is harmful to the parts and unavoidable, then it's hard to see how the whole can run smoothly, with parts of it passing from one state to another, and all of them built only to be destroyed in different ways. Does nature set out to cause its own components harm and make them vulnerable to it? Indeed, predestined to it? Or is it oblivious to what goes on? Neither one seems very plausible. But suppose we throw out nature and explain these things through inherent properties. It would still be absurd to say that the individual things in the world are inherently prone to change, and at the same time be astonished at it or complain on the grounds that it was happening contrary to nature. And least of all when things return to the state from which they came, because our elements are either simply dispersed or are subject to a kind of gravitation the solid portions being pulled toward earth, and what is ethereal drawn into the air, until they're absorbed into the universal logos, which is subject to periodic conflagrations or renewed through continual change. And don't imagine that either that those elements, the solid ones and the ethereal ones, are with us from our birth. Their influx took place yesterday or the day before from the food we ate, the air we breathed. And that's what changes, not the person your mother gave birth to. But if you're inextricably linked to it through your sense of individuality, that's not what we're talking about here. 8. Epithets for yourself: upright, modest, straightforward, sane, cooperative, disinterested. Try not to exchange them for others. And if you should forfeit them, set about getting them back. Keep in mind that sanity means understanding things, each individual thing, for what they are, and not losing the thread. And cooperation means accepting what nature assigns you, accepting it willingly. And disinterest means that the intelligence should rise above the movements of the flesh, the rough and the smooth alike, should rise above fame, above death, and everything like them. If you maintain your claim to these epithets, without caring if others apply them to you or not, you'll become a new person, living a new life. To keep on being the person that you've been, to keep being mauled and degraded by the life you're living, is to be devoid of sense and much too fond of life. Like those animal fighters at the games, torn half to pieces, covered in blood and gore, and still pleading to be held over till tomorrow, to be bitten and clawed again. Set sail then, with this handful of epithets to guide you, and steer a steady course, if you can, like an emigrant to the islands of the blessed. And if you feel yourself adrift, as if you've lost control, then hope for the best, and put in somewhere where you can regain it. Or leave life altogether, not in anger, but matter-of-factly, straightforwardly, without arrogance, in the knowledge that you've at least done that much with your life. And as you try to keep these epithets in mind, it will help you a great deal to keep the gods in mind as well. What they want is not flattery, but for rational things to be like them, for figs to do what figs were meant to do, and dogs, and bees, and people. 9. Operatics, combat, and confusion, sloth and servility, every day they blot out those sacred principles of yours which you daydream thoughtlessly about or just let slide. Your actions and perceptions need to aim at accomplishing practical ends, at the exercise of thought, at maintaining a confidence found on understanding, an unobtrusive confidence hidden in plain sight. When will you let yourself enjoy straightforwardness, seriousness, or understanding individual things, their nature and substance, their place in the world, their lifespan, their composition, who can possess them, whose they are to give and to receive? Spiders are proud of catching flies, men of catching hares, fish in nets, boars, bears, Sarmatians. Criminal psychology. 11. How they all change into one another. Acquire the ability to see that. Apply it constantly. Use it to train yourself. Nothing is as conducive to spiritual growth. 11a. He has stripped away his body, and, realizing that at some point soon he will have to abandon mankind and leave all this behind, has dedicated himself to serving justice in all he does, and nature in all that happens. What people say or think about him, or how they treat him, isn't something he worries about. Only these two questions. Is what he's doing now the right thing to be doing? Does he accept and welcome what he's been assigned? He has stripped away all other occupations, all other tasks. He wants only to travel a straight path, to God by way of law. 12. Why all this guesswork? You can see what needs to be done. If you can see the road, follow it, cheerfully, without turning back. If not, hold up and get the best advice you can. If anything gets in the way, forge on ahead. Make good use of what you have on hand, sticking to what seems right. The best goal to achieve, and the one we fall short of when we fail. 12a. To follow the Logos in all things is to be relaxed and energetic, joyful and serious at once. 13. When you wake up, ask yourself, Does it make any difference to you if other people blame you for doing what's right? It makes no difference. Have you forgotten what the people who are so vociferous in praise or blame of others are like as they sleep and eat? Forgotten their behavior, their fears, their desires, their thefts and depredations, not physical ones, but those committed by what should be highest in them? What creates, when it chooses, loyalty, humility, truth, order, well-being? 14. Nature gives and nature takes away. Anyone with sense and humility will tell her, give and take as you please, not out of defiance, but out of obedience and goodwill. 15. Only a short time left. Live as if you were alone, out in the wilderness. No difference between here and there. The city that you live in is the world. Let people see someone living naturally and understand what that means. Let them kill him if they can't stand it. Better than living like this. 16. To stop talking about what the good man is like and just be one. 17. Continual awareness of all time and space, of the size and lifespan of the things around us. A grapeseed in infinite space, a half-twist of a corkscrew against eternity. 18. Bear in mind that everything that exists is already fraying at the edges and is in transition, subject to fragmentation and to rot, or that everything was born to die. 19. How they act when they eat and sleep and mate and defecate and all the rest, then when they order and exult or rage and thunder from on high, and yet just consider the things they submitted to a moment ago and the reasons for it, and the things they'll submit to again before very long. 20. Each of us needs what nature gives us when nature gives it. 21. The earth knows longing for the rain, the sky knows longing, and the world longs to create what will come to be, I tell it. I share your longing. And isn't that what we mean by inclined to happen? 22. Possibilities. 1. To keep on living. You should be used to it by now. 2. To end it. It was your choice after all. 3. To die, having met your obligations. Those are the only options. Reason for optimism. 23. Keep away before you that this is no different from an empty field, and the things in it are the same as on a mountaintop, on the seashore, wherever. Plato gets to the heart of it. Fencing a sheepfold in the mountains and milking goats or sheep. 24. My mind, what is it? What am I making of it? What am I using it for? Is it empty of thought? Isolated and torn loose from those around it? Melted into the flesh and blended with it so that it shares its urges? 25. When a slave runs away from his master, we call him a fugitive slave. But the law of nature is a master too, and to break it is to become a fugitive. To feel grief, anger, or fear is to try to escape from something decreed by the ruler of all things, now or in the past or in the future, and that ruler is law, which governs what happens to each of us. To feel grief or anger or fear is to become a fugitive from justice. 26. He deposits his sperm and leaves, and then a force not his takes it and goes to work and creates a child. This from that? Or he pours food down his throat, and then a force not his takes it and creates sensations, desires, daily life, physical strength, and so much else besides. To look at these things going on silently and see the force that drives them, as we see the force that pushes things and pulls them, not with our eyes, but just as clearly. 27. To bear in mind constantly that all of this has happened before and will happen again, the same plot from beginning to end, the identical staging. Produce them in your mind as you know them from experience or from history, the court of Hadrian, of Antoninus, the courts of Philip, Alexander, Croesus, all just the same, only the people different. 28. People who feel hurt and resentment picture them as the pig at the sacrifice, kicking and squealing all the way, like the man alone in his bed, silently weeping over the chains that bind us, that everything has to submit, but only rational beings can do so voluntarily. 29. Stop whatever you're doing for a moment and ask yourself, am I afraid of death because I won't be able to do this anymore? 30. When faced with people's bad behavior, turn around and ask when you have acted like that. When you saw money as a good, or pleasure, or social position, your anger will subside as soon as you recognize that they acted under compulsion. What else could they do? Or remove the compulsion, if you can. 31. When you look at Satyron, see Socrates, or Eutyches, or Hymen. When you look at Euphrates, see Eutychian, or Silvanus. With Alciphron, see Trophaeus. When you look at Xenophon, see Crito or Severus. When you look at yourself, see any of the emperors. And the same with everyone else. Then let it hit you. Where are they now? Nowhere, or wherever. That way you'll see human life for what it is. Smoke, nothing. Especially when you recall that once things alter, they cease to exist through all the endless years to come. Then why such turmoil? To live your brief life rightly, isn't that enough? The raw material you're missing, the opportunities. What is any of this but training for your logos, in life observed accurately, scientifically. So keep at it until it's fully digested, as a strong stomach digests whatever it eats, as a blazing fire takes whatever you throw on it and makes it light and flame. That no one can say truthfully that you are not a straightforward or honest person. That anyone who thinks that believes a falsehood. The responsibility is all yours. No one can stop you from being honest or straightforward. Simply resolve not to go on living if you aren't. It would be contrary to the Logos. 33. Given the material we're made of, what's the sanest thing that we can do or say? Whatever it may be, you can do or say it. Don't pretend that anything's stopping you. You'll never stop complaining until you feel the same pleasure that the hedonist gets from self-indulgence. Only from doing what's proper to human beings as far as circumstances, inherent or fortuitous, allow. Enjoyment means doing as much of what your nature requires as you can, and you can do that anywhere. A privilege not granted to a cylinder, to determine its own action, or to water or fire or any of the other things governed by nature alone, or by an irrational soul. Too many things obstruct them and get in their way. But the intellect and logos are able to make their way through anything in their path. By inborn capacity or sheer force of will, keep before your eyes the ease with which they do this. The ease with which the logos is carried through all things, as fire is drawn upward, or a stone falls to earth, as a cylinder rolls down an inclined plane. That's all you need. All other obstacles either affect the lifeless body or have no power to shake or harm anything unless misperception takes over or the logos surrenders voluntarily. Otherwise, those they obstruct would be degraded by them immediately. In all other entities, when anything bad happens to them, it affects them for the worse. Whereas here, a person is improved by it, if I can put it like that, and we admire him for reacting as a person should. And keep in mind that nothing can harm one of nature's citizens except what harms the city he belongs to, and nothing harms that city except what harms its law. And there is no so-called misfortune that can do that. So long as the law is safe, so is the city and the citizen. 34. If you immerse yourself in the principles of truth, the briefest, most random reminder is enough to dispel all fear and pain. Leaves that the wind drives earthward, such are the generations of men. Your children leaves applauding loyally and heaping praise upon you, or turning around and calling down curses, sneering and mocking from a safe distance. A glorious reputation handed down by leaves. All of these spring up in springtime, and the wind blows them all away, and the tree puts forth others to replace them. None of us have much time, and yet you act as if things were eternal, the way you fear and long for them. Before long, darkness, and whoever buries you mourned in their turn. 35. A healthy pair of eyes should see everything that can be seen and not say, no, too bright, which is a symptom of ophthalmia. A healthy sense of hearing or smell should be prepared for any sound or scent. A healthy stomach should have the same reaction to all foods as a mill to what it grinds. So, too, a healthy mind should be prepared for anything. The one that keeps saying, "Are my children all right?" or "Everyone must approve of me," is like eyes that can only stand pale colors, or teeth that can handle only mush. 36. Doesn't matter how good a life you've led, there'll still be people standing around the bed who will welcome the sad event. Even with the intelligent and good, won't there be someone thinking, finally, to be through with that old school teacher? Even though he never said anything, you could always feel him judging you. And that's for a good man. How many traits do you have that would make a lot of people glad to be rid of you? Remember that when the time comes. You'll be less reluctant to leave if you can tell yourself, this is the sort of life I'm leaving. Even the people around me, the ones I spent so much time fighting for, praying over, caring about, even they want me gone in hopes that it will make their own lives easier. How could anyone stand a longer stay here? And yet don't leave angry with them. Be true to who you are, caring, sympathetic, kind, and not as if you are being torn away from life, but the way it is when someone dies peacefully, how the soul is released from the body. That's how you should leave them. It was nature that bound you to them, that tied the knot, and nature that now unties you. I am released from those around me, not dragged against my will, but unresisting. There are things that nature demands, and this is one of them. 37. Learn to ask of all actions, why are they doing that? Starting with your own. 38. Remember that what pulls the strings is within, hidden from us. His speech, his life, is the person. Don't conceive the rest as a part of it. The skin that contains it, the accompanying organs, which are tools, like a carpenter's axe, except that they are attached to us from birth, and no more use without what moves and holds them still than the weaver's shuttle, the writer's pencil, the driver's whip. In the book 10. Almost done. 2 more books. Alright. Hopefully my voice will hone out. Alright. Book 11. 1. Characteristics of the rational soul. Self-perception, self-examination, and the power to make itself whatever it wants. It reaps its own harvest, unlike plants, and in a different way animals, whose yield is gathered in by others. It reaches its intended goal no matter where the limit of its life is set. Not like dancing and theater and the things like that, where the performance is incomplete if it's broken off in the middle, but at any point, no matter which one you pick, it has fulfilled its mission, done its work completely, so that it can say, I have what I came for. It surveys the world and the empty space around it and the way it's put together. It delves into the endlessness of time to extend its grasp and comprehension of the periodic births and rebirths that the world goes through. It knows that those who come after us will see nothing different, that those who came before us saw no more than we do, and that anyone with 40 years behind him and eyes in his head has seen both past and future, both alike. Also characteristic of the rational soul, affection for its neighbors, truthfulness, humility, not to place anything above itself, which is characteristic of law as well. No difference here between the logos of rationality and that of justice. 2. To acquire indifference to pretty singing, to dancing, to the martial arts, analyze the melody into the notes that form it, and as you hear each one, ask yourself whether you're powerless against that. That should be enough to deter you. The same with dancing, individual movements and tableau, and the same with the martial arts, and with everything except virtue and what springs from it. Look at the individual parts and move from analysis to indifference. Apply this to life as a whole. The resolute soul, resolute in separation from the body, and then in dissolution or fragmentation or continuity. But the resolution has to be the result of its own decision, not just in response to outside forces, like the Christians. It has to be considered and serious, persuasive to other people without dramatics. 4. Have I done something for the common good? Then I share in the benefits. To stay centered on that, not to give up. 5. In your profession, goodness. And how is that to be achieved except by thought about the world, about the nature of people? 6. First, tragedies, to remind us of what can happen and that it happens inevitably. And if something gives you pleasure on that stage, it shouldn't cause you anger on this one. You realize that these are things we all have to go through, and that even those who cry aloud, O Mount Citharon, have to endure them, and some excellent lines as well. These, for example: "If I and my 2 children cannot move the gods must have their reasons." Or, "And why should we feel anger at this world?" And, "To harvest life like standing stalks of grain," and a good many others. Then after tragedy, old comedy, instructive in its frankness, its plain speaking designed to puncture pretensions. Diogenes used the same tactic for similar ends. Then consider the middle and later the new comedy and what it aimed at, gradually degenerating into mere realism and empty technique. There are undeniably good passages even in those writers, but what was the point of it all, the script and staging alike? 7. It stares you in the face. No role is so well suited to philosophy as the one you happen to be in right now. 8. A branch cut away from the branch beside it is simultaneously cut away from the whole tree. So too a human being separated from another is cut loose from the whole community. The branch is cut off by someone else, but people cut themselves off through hatred, through rejection, and don't realize that they're cutting themselves off from the whole civic enterprise. Except that we also have a gift, given us by Zeus, who founded this community of ours. We can reattach ourselves and become once more components of the whole. But if the rupture is too often repeated, it makes the severed part hard to reconnect and to restore. You can see the difference between the branch that's been there since the beginning, remaining on the tree and growing with it, and the one that's been cut off and grafted back. One trunk, 2 minds, as the gardener puts it. Nine. As you move forward in the logos, people will stand in your way. They can't keep you from doing what's healthy. Don't let them stop you from putting up with them either. Take care on both accounts, not just sound judgments, solid actions, tolerance as well for those who try to obstruct us or give us trouble in other ways. Because anger too is weakness, as much as breaking down and giving up the struggle. Both are deserters. The man who breaks and runs, and the one who lets himself be alienated from his fellow humans. 10. The natural can never be inferior to the artificial. Art imitates nature, not the reverse. In which case, that most highly developed and comprehensive nature, nature itself, can fall short of artifice in its craftsmanship. Now all the arts move from lower goals to higher ones. Won't nature do the same? Hence justice, which is the source of all the other virtues. Or how could we do what justice requires if we are distracted by things that don't matter, if we are naive, gullible, and constant? 11. It's the pursuit of these things and your attempts to avoid them that leave you in such turmoil, and yet they aren't seeking you out. You are the one seeking them. Suspend judgment about them, and at once they will lie still, and you will be freed from fleeing and pursuing. 12. The soul is a sphere in equilibrium, not grasping at things beyond it or retreating inward, not fragmenting outward, not sinking back on itself, but ablaze with light and looking at the truth, without and within. 13. Someone despises me. That's their problem. Mine not to do or say anything despicable. Someone hates me. Their problem. Mine to be patient and cheerful with everyone, including them, ready to show them their mistake, not spitefully or to show off my own self-control, but in an honest, upright way. Like Phocion, if he wasn't just pretending. That's what we should be like inside, and never let the gods catch us feeling anger or resentment. As long as you do what's proper to your nature and accept what the world's nature has in store, as long as you work for your others' good, by any and all means, what is there that can harm you? 14. They flatter one another out of contempt, and their desire to rule one another makes them bow and scrape. 15. The despicable phoniness of people who say, "Listen, I'm going to level with you here." What does that mean? It shouldn't even need to be said. It should be obvious, written in block letters on your forehead. It should be audible in your voice, visible in your eyes, like a lover who looks into your face and takes in the whole story at a glance. A straightforward, honest person should be like someone who stinks. When you're in the same room with him, you know it. But false straightforwardness is like a knife in the back. False friendship is the worst. Avoid it at all costs. If you're honest and straightforward and mean well, it should show in your eyes. It should be unmistakable. 16. To live a good life. We have the potential for it, if we can learn to be indifferent to what makes no difference. This is how we learn, by looking at each thing, both the parts and the whole, keeping in mind that none of them can dictate how we perceive it. They don't impose themselves on us, they hover before us, unmoving. It is we who generate the judgments, inscribing them on ourselves, and we don't have to. We could leave the page blank, and if a mark slips through, erase it instantly. Remember how brief is the attentiveness required, and then our lives will end. And why is it so hard when things go against you? If it's imposed by nature, accept it gladly and stop fighting it. And if not, work out what your own nature requires, and aim at it at that, even if it brings you no glory. None of us is forbidden to pursue our own good. 17. Source and substance of each thing, what it changes into and what it's like transformed, that nothing can harm it. 18. 1. My relationship to them, that we came into the world for the sake of one another, or from another point of view I came into it to be their guardian, as the ram is of the flock and the bull of the herd. Start from this, if not atoms, then nature, directing everything. In that case, lower things for the sake of higher ones, and higher ones for one another. 2. What they're like eating in bed, etc., how driven they are by their beliefs, how proud they are of what they do. 3. That if they're right to do this, then you have no right to complain, and if they aren't, then they do it involuntarily, out of ignorance, because all souls are prevented from treating others as they deserve, just as they are kept from truth, unwillingly, which is why they resent being called unjust or arrogant or greedy, and any suggestion that they aren't good neighbors. 4. That you've made enough mistakes yourself, you're just like them. Even if there are some you've avoided, you have the potential. Even if cowardice has kept you from them, or fear of what people would say, or some equally bad reason. 5. That you don't know for sure it is a mistake. A lot of things are means to some other end. You have to know an awful lot before you can judge other people's actions with real understanding. 6. When you lose your temper or even feel irritated, that human life is very short. Before long, all of us will be laid out side by side. 7. That it's not what they do that bothers us. That's a problem for their minds, not ours. It's our own misperceptions. Discard them. Be willing to give up thinking of this as a catastrophe. And your anger is gone. How do you do that? By recognizing that you've suffered no disgrace. Unless disgrace is the only thing that can hurt you, you're doomed to commit innumerable offenses, to become a thief, or heaven only knows what else. 8. How much more damage anger and grief do than the things that cause them. 9. That kindness is invincible, provided it's sincere, not ironic or an act. What can even the most vicious person do if you keep treating him with kindness and gently set him straight? If you get the chance, correcting him cheerfully at the exact moment that he's trying to do you harm. No, my friend, that isn't what we're here for. It isn't me who's harmed by that, it's you. And show him gently and without pointing fingers that it's so. That bees don't behave like this, or any other animal with a sense of community. Don't do it sardonically or meanly, but affectionately, with no hatred in your heart, and not ex cathedra, or to impress third parties, but speaking directly, even if there are other people around. Keep these 9 points in mind, like gifts from the 9 muses, and start becoming a human being, now and for the rest of your life. Excuse me. And along with not getting angry at others, try not to pander either. Both are forms of selfishness. Both of them will do you harm. When you start to lose your temper, remember, there's nothing manly about rage. It's courtesy and kindness that define a human being and a man. That's who possesses strength and nerves and guts, not the angry whiners. To react like that brings you closer to impassivity, and so to strength. Pain is the opposite of strength, and so is anger. Both are things we suffer from and yield to. And one more thought from Apollo. 10. That to expect bad people not to injure others is crazy. It's to ask the impossible. And to let them behave like that to other people but expect them to exempt you is arrogant, the act of a tyrant. 19. 4 habits of thought to watch for and erase from your mind when you catch them. Tell yourself, this thought is unnecessary. This one is disruptive to the people around you. This wouldn't be what you really think, to say what you don't think, the definition of absurdity. And the 4th reason for self-reproach, that the more divine part of you has been beaten and subdued by the degraded mortal part, the body and its stupid self-indulgence. 20. Your spirit and the fire contained within, you are drawn by their nature upward. But they comply with the world's designs and submit to being mingled here below. And the elements of earth and water in you are drawn by their nature downward, but are forced to rise and take up a position not their own. So even the elements obey the world when ordered and compelled, and man their stations until the signal to abandon them arrives. So why should your intellect be the only to center, the only one complaining about its posting? It's not as if anything is being forced on it, only what its own nature requires, and yet it refuses to comply and sets off in the opposite direction, because to be drawn toward what is wrong and self-indulgent, towards anger and fear and pain, is to revolt against nature. And for the mind to complain about anything that happens is to desert its post. It was created to show reverence, respect for the divine, no less than to act justly. That is an element of coexistence and a prerequisite for justice. Only a few more pages. I'm going to rest my voice. 21. If you don't have a consistent goal in life, you can't live it in a consistent way. Unhelpful unless you specify a goal. There is no common benchmark for all the things that people think are good, except for a few, the ones that affect us all. So the goal should be a common one, a civic one. If you direct all your energies towards that, your actions will be consistent, and so will you. 22. The town mouse and the country mouse. Distress and agitation of the town mouse. 23. Socrates used to call popular beliefs the monsters under the bed, only useful for frightening children with. 24. At festivals, the Spartans put their guest seats in the shade, but sat themselves down anywhere. 25. Socrates declining Perdiccas's invitation so as to avoid dying 1,000 deaths by accepting a favor he couldn't pay back. 26. This advice from Epicurean writings, to think continually of one of the men of old who lived a virtuous life. 27. The Pythagoreans tell us to look at the stars at daybreak, to remind ourselves how they complete the tasks assigned them, always the same task, the same way, and their order, purity, nakedness, stars wear no concealment. 28. Socrates dressed in a towel, the time Xanthippe took his cloak and went out. The friends who were embarrassed and avoided him when they saw him dressed like that, and what Socrates said to them. 29. Mastery of reading and writing requires a master, still more so life. 30. For you are but a slave, and have no claim to logos. 31. But my heart rejoiced. 32. And jeer at virtue with their taunts and sneers. 33. Stupidity is expecting figs in winter, or children in old age. 34. As you kiss your son goodnight, say Epictetus, whisper to yourself, he may be dead in the morning. Don't tempt fate, you say. By talking about a natural event, is fate tempted when we speak of grain being reaped? 35. Grapes, unripe, ripened, then raisins, constant transitions, not the not, but the not yet. 36. No thefts of free will reported. 37. We need to master the art of acquiescence. We need to pay attention to our impulses, making sure they don't go unmoderated, that they benefit others, that they're worthy of us. We need to steer clear of desire in any form and not try to avoid what's beyond our control. 38. This is not a debate about just anything, he said, but about sanity itself. 39. Socrates, what do you want, rational minds or irrational ones? Rational ones. Healthy or sick? Healthy. Then work to obtain them. We already have. Then why are all this squabbling? In the book 11. Almost done. Almost done. Book 12. 1. Everything you're trying to reach by taking the long way round, you could have right now, this moment, if you'd only stop thwarting your own attempts, if you'd only let go of the past and trust the future to providence and guide the present towards reverence and justice. Reverence, so you'll accept what you're allotted, nature intended it for you, and you for it. Justice, so that you'll speak the truth frankly and without evasions, and act as you should, and as other people deserve. Don't let anything deter you. Other people's misbehavior, your own misperceptions, what people will say, or the feeling of the body that covers you. Let the affected part take care of those. And if, when it's time to depart, you shunt everything aside except your mind and the divinity within, if it isn't ceasing to live that you're afraid of, but never beginning to live properly, then you'll be worthy of the world that made you. No longer an alien in your own land, no longer shocked by everyday events as if they were unheard of aberrations, no longer at the mercy of this or that. 2. God sees all our souls freed from their fleshly containers, stripped clean of their bark, cleansed of their grime. He grasps with his intelligence alone what was poured and channeled from himself into them. If you learn to do the same, you can avoid a great deal of distress. When you see through the flesh that covers you, will you be unsettled by clothing, mansions, celebrity, the painted sets, the costume, cupboard? 3. Your 3 components, body, breath, mind, 2 are yours in trust. To the 3rd alone you have clear title. If you can cut yourself, your mind, free of what other people do and say, of what you've said or done, of the things that you're afraid will happen, the impositions of the body that constrains you, and the breath within, and what the whirling chaos sweeps in from outside, so that the mind is freed from fate, brought to clarity and lives life on its own recognizance, doing what's right, accepting what happens, and speaking the truth. If you can cut free of impressions that cling to the mind, free of the future and the past, can make yourself, as Empedocles says, a sphere rejoicing in its perfect stillness, and concentrate on living what can be lived, which means the present, then you can spend the time you have left in tranquility and in kindness and at peace with the spirit within you. 4. It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about the opinion than our own. If a God appeared to us, or a wise human being even, and prohibited us from concealing our thoughts or imagining anything without immediately shouting it out, we wouldn't make it through a single day. That's how much we value other people's opinions instead of our own. 5. How is it that the gods arranged everything with such skill, such care for our well-being, and somehow overlooked one thing, that certain people, in fact the best of them, the gods' own partners, the ones whose piety and good works brought them closest to the divine, that these people, when they die, should cease to exist forever, utterly vanished? Well, assuming that's really true, you can be sure they would have arranged things differently if that had been appropriate. If it were the right thing to do, they could have done it, and if it were natural, nature would have demanded it. So from the fact that they didn't, if that's the case, we can conclude that it was inappropriate. Surely you can see yourself that to ask the question is to challenge the gods' fairness, and why would you be bringing in fairness unless the gods are in fact fair, and absolutely so? And if they are, how could they have carelessly overlooked something so unfair, so illogical in setting up the world? 6. Practice even what seems impossible. The left hand is useless at almost everything for lack of practice, but it guides the reins better than the right from practice. 7. The condition of soul and body when death comes for us, shortness of life, vastness of time before and after, fragility of matter. 8. To see the causes of things stripped bare, the aim of actions, pain, pleasure, death, fame. Who is responsible for our own restlessness? That no one obstructs us, that it's all in how you perceive it. 9. The student as boxer, not fencer. The fencer's weapon is picked up and put down again. The boxer is part of him. All he has to do is clench his fist. 10. To see things as they are, substance, cause, and purpose. 11. The freedom to do only what God wants and accept whatever God sends. 11a. What it's made of. 12. The gods are not to blame. They do nothing wrong on purpose or by accident, nor men either. They don't do it on purpose. No one is to blame. 13. The foolishness of people who are surprised by anything that happens, like travelers amazed at foreign customs. 14. Fatal necessity and inescapable order, or benevolent providence, or confusion, random and undirected. If it's an inescapable necessity, why resist it? If its providence admits of being worshipped, then try to be worthy of God's aid. If it's confusion and anarchy, then be grateful that on this raging sea you have a mind to guide you. And if the storm should carry you away, let it carry off flesh, breath and all the rest, but not the mind, which can't be swept away. 15. The lamp shines until it's put out, without losing its gleam, and yet in you it all gutters out so early. Truth, justice, self-control. 16. When someone seems to have injured you, but how can I be sure? And in any case, keep in mind that he's already been tried and convicted by himself, like scratching your own eyes out. That to expect a bad person not to harm others is like expecting fig trees not to secrete juices, babies not to cry, horses not to neigh, the inevitable not to happen. What else could they do with that sort of character? If you're still angry, then get to work on that. 17. If it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it. 18. At all times, look at the thing itself, the thing behind the appearance, and unpack it by analysis. Cause, substance, purpose, the length of time it exists. 19. It's time you realize that you have something in you more powerful and miraculous than the things that affect you and make you dance like a puppet. What's in my thoughts at this moment? Fear, jealousy, desire, feelings like that? 20. To undertake nothing. 1. At random or without a purpose. 2. For any reason but the common good. 21. That before long you'll be no one and nowhere, like all the things you see now, all the people now living. Everything's destiny is to change, to be transformed, to perish, so that new things can be born. 22. It's all in how you perceive it. You're in control. You can dispense with misperception at will, like rounding the point. Serenity, total calm, safe anchorage. 27. A given action that stops when it's supposed to is none the worse for stopping, nor the person engaged in it either. So, too, with the succession of actions we call life. If it ends when it's supposed to, it's none the worse for that. And the person who comes to the end of the line has no cause for complaint. The time and stopping point are set by nature, our own nature in some cases, death from old age, or nature as a whole, whose parts shifting and changing constantly renew the world and keep it on schedule. Nothing that benefits all things can be ugly or out of place. The end of life is not an evil. It doesn't disgrace us. Why should we be ashamed of an involuntary act that injures no one? It's a good thing, scheduled by the world, promoting it, promoted by it. This is how we become godlike, following God's path and reasons, goals. 24. 3 things essential at all times. A. Your own actions, that they're not arbitrary or different from what abstract justice would do. B. External events that they happen randomly or by design. You can't complain about chance. You can't argue with providence. 2. When all things are like, from the planting of the seed to the quickening of life, from its quickening to its relinquishment, where the parts came from and where they return to, that if you're suddenly lifted up and could see life, its variety from a vast height, and at the same time all the things around you in the sky and beyond it, you'd see how pointless it is. And no matter how often you saw it, it would be the same life forms, the same lifespan. Arrogance about this? 25. Throw out your misperceptions and you'll be fine. And who's stopping you from throwing them out? 26. To be angry at something means you've forgotten that everything that happens is natural, that the responsibility is theirs, not yours, and further, that whatever happens has always happened and always will, and it's happening at this very moment, everywhere, just like this. What links one human being to all humans, not blood or birth, but mind. and that an individual's mind is God and of God, that nothing belongs to anyone, children, body, life itself, all of them come from the same source. That's all how you choose to see things. That's the present is all we have to live in or to lose. 27. Constantly run down the list of those who felt intense anger at something the most famous, the most unfortunate, the most hated, the most whatever, and ask, where is all that now? Smoke, dust, legend, or not even a legend. Think of all the examples. Fabius Catullus in the country, Lucius Lupus in the orchard, Stertinius at Bai, Tiberius on Capri, Velius Rufus, obsession and arrogance, and how trivial those things, the things we want so passionately are, and how much more philosophical it would be to take what we're given and show uprightness, self-control, obedience to God without making a production of it. There's nothing more insufferable than people who boast about their own humility. 28. People ask, have you ever seen the gods you worship? How can you be sure they exist? Answers, just look around you. I've never seen my soul either, and yet I revere it. That's how I know the gods exist, and why I revere them, from having felt their power over and over. 29. Salvation, to see each thing for what it is, its nature and its purpose, to do only what is right, say only what is true without holding back. What else could it be but to live life fully, to pay out goodness like the rings of a chain, without the slightest gap. 30. Singular, not plural, sunlight, thought broken up, though broken up by walls and mountains and 1,000 other things. Substance, though split into 1,000 forms, variously shaped. Life, though distributed among 1,000 different natures with their individual limitations. Intelligence, even if it seems to be divided. The other components, breath, matter, lack any awareness or connection to one another, yet unity and its gravitational pull embrace them too. But intelligence is uniquely drawn toward what is akin to it, and joins with it inseparably in shared awareness. 31. What is it you want? To keep on breathing? What about feeling? Desiring? Growing? Ceasing to grow? Using your voice? Thinking? Which of them seems worth having? But if you can do without them all, then continue to follow the Logos and God to the end, to prize those other things, to grieve because death deprives us of them is an obstacle. 32. The fraction of infinity, of the vast abyss of time allotted to each of us, absorbed in an instant into eternity, the fraction of all substance and all spirit, the fraction of the whole earth you crawl about on. Keep all that in mind, and don't treat anything as important except doing what your nature demands, and accepting what nature sends you. 33. How the mind conducts itself, it all depends on that. All the rest is within its power, or beyond its control, corpses and smoke. 34. An incentive to treat death as unimportant. Even people whose own morality is pain and pleasure can manage that much. 35. If you make rightness alone your good, if a few actions more or less governed by the right logos or merely a few more or less, if it makes no difference whether you look at the world for this long or that long, then death shouldn't scare you. 36. You've lived as a citizen in a great city. 5 years or 100, what's the difference? The laws make no distinction. And to be sent away from it, not by a tyrant or a dishonest judge, but by nature, who first invited you in, why is that so terrible? Like the impresario ringing down the curtain on an actor, but I've only gotten through 3 acts. Yes, this will be a drama in 3 acts, the length fixed by the power that directed your creation, and now directs your dissolution. Neither was yours to determine. So make your exit with grace, the same grace shown to you. And that is the end of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I'm going to end the stream there. Don't know what I'm going to read next Monday, or start reading. Hopefully a history, actual history this time, instead of a philosophy. That was a warm-up. I don't know. I'll maybe post it. So anyway, and I'll probably stream tomorrow. whatever games after work. But thanks for hanging. See you all later.